Hi, I'm Claire, and welcome back to my channel. Today, I'm going to be talking about a question that I struggled with for a long time. How do you give your characters unique voices? So people in real life don't all speak the same. They may have things in common about the way that they speak. They're going to use the same words to describe things if they speak the same language. But people have things that they like to say or don't like to say, or unique ways that they phrase things. Have you ever made a new friend and hung out with them all the time and noticed yourself starting to say little things that friend says? Like little catchphrases or something? I know I definitely have. If a person lives in a particular place, they might have an accent. I come from the Northeast in the US, and my accent reflects that. If your character came from Texas in the US, their accent might reflect that. If your character has a particular personality, let's say they're anxious, they might stutter or they might catch over their words. Let's say you're writing a character who's really book smart and bases some of their self-worth on how smart they perceive themselves to be and how smart other people perceive them to be. That character may choose to use a lot of big words. Some characters might curse a lot. Some characters might speak in an extremely proper way. A lot of the best written characters have a distinct way that they speak. You might not even need dialogue tags to figure out who's speaking in that book because they all sound so distinctive. When you're writing characters, it's important to make sure that those characters don't sound like you and your own author voice, but that they sound like real people and authentically themselves. But how do you do this? There's no one way to do this, which is why I struggled with it so much. But I did a lot of thinking about it, and I did a lot of practicing, and I have finally developed a list of things I like to do in order to make this happen for myself, so that's what I'm sharing with you today. The first thing I like to do when trying to create unique character voices is write monologues in that character's voice. What I do is I sit down and I try to imagine that character and just write down how they would speak about something super random. For example, when trying to nail the voice of the protagonist in my supernatural thriller, I wrote about a trip that she took to the bakery with her younger brother. I wrote it as if she were telling her boyfriend, who she trusts, all about these crazy cookies that the woman started making at the bakery. I imagined her sitting down with her boyfriend and starting to have this conversation with him and getting excited about it. And I wrote it from the first person, so it would be just as if she were telling that story. I tried to be as detailed with the story as possible and make it as authentic as I could, and after I was finished writing that one, I would write another one. This time, it was something that Shiloh was frustrated about. Now she was venting, now she was angry. And as I sat with that and kept writing these monologues, I started to figure out exactly what she sounded like, what the commonalities were in between those monologues. This exercise helps because it forces you to pay attention to what the character sounds like, absent every single plot element present in dialogue. Usually, dialogue works to either show character or advance plot in some way. These monologues don't have to advance the plot at all, and you can really just focus on what that character would sound like in a very ordinary way. So I would definitely recommend writing these, and I would also recommend writing multiple, especially if it's one of your main characters who you hear talk a lot. 2, I write down the catchphrases they have. A lot of people have things that they like to say a lot in normal conversation. People usually go through phases of things that they say and don't say. For example, lately I have found myself saying much excite a lot. I also say oh baby a lot, or I'll say yikes. I bet you have things like this too, and your characters, if they're gonna talk like normal people, should too. Now this process is often a little bit arbitrary unless these catchphrases just naturally come up in your monologues. With my characters, I'll usually just start brainstorming things that sound like what they would say. Or if I'm basing a character off of a person that I know, I will use catchphrases that they've said and give them to that character. And then I'll make sure to actually use them in the story that I'm writing. I usually do a lot of this voice stuff while I'm editing and not when I'm writing the first draft because I'm paying attention to plot more and I'm still getting to know the characters when I'm writing the first draft. This usually is all saved for editing. If your characters use catchphrases consistently, they're gonna start to sound like real people, even if those catchphrases are embarrassing. Like mine. Much excite. 3, I like to highlight every character's lines in a different color. Again, I do this while I'm editing. I go back through my manuscript and choose a different color for all of my main characters, and I highlight their dialogue when it happens. This way, when I'm editing a scene, I can instantly see which character is saying what, and make sure that everything that they say matches what they actually sound like. This also makes it easy to read aloud, which is helpful because then you can see whether or not it sounds authentic. Here is an example of a scene that I've done this with. I only have 2 characters in this scene, my protagonist Shiloh and her boyfriend Miles, and Shiloh is highlighted in yellow and Miles is highlighted in blue. When I wrote the rough draft of this book, I did not think about voice at all, so when I was editing, I was able to go through and see exactly what they sounded like and add their catchphrases and delete things that I knew that they absolutely would not say after writing the monologues. I really recommend this exercise because it makes it very clear when your characters sound the same and makes it very easy for you to go and edit them to sound different. 4. Figure out what kind of character each of your characters are. Try to figure out what category your character falls into. These are not the only categories, but some examples of categories are things like leaders, or followers, or nurturers, or antagonists. What are the umbrella tropes that your characters fall under, if that makes sense? If you kind of figure out vaguely what box your character fits into within the context of the other characters in the story, it can help clue you into the way that they would authentically react to things, or what opinions they might have on things, or how they play off each other. It will help you figure out whether a character's reaction is disingenuous to who they are as a character, even though it might help your story. And if this is the case, you might need to move some things around because you don't want your characters to act not like themselves. For example, this really helped me with one of my characters in my thriller, Francesca. She has the ability to see ghosts, and she's had a very difficult life because her mother died when she was young, and people bully her at school relentlessly. But she has this huge heart, and she really cares about people, and is just wildly empathetic. So I figured out that the kind of umbrella that she falls under is a nurturer. She likes to take care of people and make sure that people are okay, and she leads with that gentle side of herself. She doesn't naturally take charge of situations. I have a scene in the book where she's being bullied, and in the first draft, she stands up for herself and she gets upset and she bites back at the bully. But once I figured out that she leads with this empathy and she's super nurturing, I was reading that scene and I realized that this is not something that she would say. She would react to this bully by shutting down, and by being really sad about it, not by standing up and biting back at the bully. So these can help add some parameters to your characters if you feel like you want a little bit of extra guidance in building them and figuring out how to make them consistent. Also, if you're building characters, this can be a cool thing to do. It gives you a sort of framework to go off of. 5. Interview them. You can use character questionnaires for these. I know that that's pretty helpful for some people. I usually don't use questionnaires I find on the internet and just make up my own questions. I set up a chair in the room and I picture the character sitting on this chair, and I just imagine asking them questions and trying to visualize them in my head. I don't know if that sounds crazy. That might sound crazy. I picture that movie, The Man That Invented Christmas, where Charles Dickens is actually talking to his characters. My version is not as crazy as that, but if you can try to visualize them as real people as much as you can, or as characters in a movie, then that can help you figure out exactly what their authentic speech patterns would be. 6. Base characters off of people you know. I like doing this. This is fun. If you base a character off of a person that you know, pay attention to the way that that person speaks. Do they have catchphrases? How do they react to things? Do they love talking about their feelings? Do they shut down when they have to talk about their feelings? If it's someone you know really well, check in with the lines that you've written in the book. Would the person that you know in real life ever say those things? This is actually a really great hack for creating character voices. Cast the people in your life as characters in your book. Base your main character's dad on your own dad, or your friend's dad. Base your main character's brother on one of your friends. Read the lines that your main character's brother says in your story. Would your friend say those things? What is something that your dad says all the time? Make your character say that. Now, you probably won't know someone in your life that corresponds to every single one of your characters, but just use it for some characters that you can. It's helpful, especially when you're first starting to try to learn about voice. That's how I taught myself about it, and I think it worked. And my 7th tip is study people. Sit out in public and listen to people. An exercise that my professor had us do in my introductory fiction writing class was that we had to sit in the campus bookstore and listen to some people talk and write down their conversation. Only for about 5 minutes. You write down exactly what people say and what you overhear as you hear it. Obviously, do not go out and record people without their permission, but just write it in your notebook and then you can read it back. And this should give you an idea as to the way that some people use words. If two people are having a conversation with each other, notice how one person may speak in a slightly different way than the other person, and try to figure out what those differences are. I don't want you to be creepy. I'm not telling you to go out there and be creepy. Also, it's worth noting here that dialogue is different from spoken speech. Dialogue has to either advance the plot of your story or show character in some way. It also should not be superfluous. Nobody wants to read paragraphs in a book of somebody going and telling a really weird roundabout story that doesn't serve any purpose in the book. So you want your dialogue to be as succinct as possible, while also sounding different from the dialogue of other characters. Also listen to podcasts. Or pay attention to the way that people speak in documentaries or YouTube videos or reality TV shows. So those are my 7 tips. Creating unique voices for your characters is a really hard thing to do. It's not something that you can artificially do. It's something that you need to work at for a while in order to understand it and internalize it, but hopefully these 7 things help give you a head start. The more that you pay attention to voice, the sooner it's gonna click in your head. Once you start working on it, it gets easier. You just kind of need to start paying attention to it and start working at it. And also, don't go crazy with catchphrases or anything. Like, if you determine that your character really likes to say, "oh baby," don't have them say "oh baby" every single chance they get. Just like, you know, occasionally. Also, the longer that you write a story and the better you start to know your characters, the more authentic their voices are going to sound naturally. Because you're going to know exactly the ins and outs of how their mind works, so it's going to be easy for you to write their dialogue. Alright, that's all for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed it, please make sure to like it and subscribe to my channel for more writing content every Monday. And my giveaway is open until Friday the 22nd at 5 p.m, so make sure, if you haven't already, to get your entries in. I've put the link in the description. Bye everyone!